Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
From Offscript Media, I am Matthew Zachary, and this is Out of Patience. On today's show, the glamorous, exotic world of clinical trials. Lots of problems. We're going to chat. I'm joined by my co-founder, Andrew McDowell, along with Eric Kroll, who is the co-founder at Adaptive Health. He's got an MBA out of Stanford. This guy is a serial entrepreneur, advisor, investor. He's also on the board of directors of Ben's Friends, a nonprofit dedicated to creating patient communities for people with rare diseases. Also here is Jeremy Block, the other co-founder at Adaptive Health. He is a digital health research and regulatory biochemist. Say that 10 times fast. He's got a doctor of philosophy and biochemistry from Duke, and he's also executive director and co-investigator for Sloan Kettering. We had an incredible conversation, breaking things down and doing a little schoolhouse rock, if you would, on what just exactly is going on in the world of clinical trials. We hope you enjoyed the show. We're talking here with our friends at Adaptive Health about what I would affectionately call stupid clinical trials, and the word itself and their business and how are we solving problems and what's the space like and the stigma around this, and it's just a bunch of noise. And I like to be proven wrong. So I'd like to understand what drove you into this madness that is the world of healthcare.
Oh, geez. Oh, so Eric is looking at me and saying,
lose that battle.
I lose that battle. So what drove me into this? It's the reverse of what you said. It's actually madness that drove me into this. And it's madness at a system that is very broken, which I think we all sort of agree upon. Healthcare and healthcare technology is probably 20 to 30 years behind in terms of the things that it has taken on. And that's a lot to do with the fact that it's regulated. Financial technology is the same way. It lagged behind social media and other unregulated spaces. So I take that perspective. That doesn't mean that it should be as far behind as it is, that in 2020, you have healthcare systems across the country still wondering whether the cloud is safe. And it's really funny when they write that in an email and send it to you from something that's backed by Google and Gmail.
Right.
It's like, okay, that's the cloud. So there's a lot broken. From a trial standpoint, so I was an IRB chair at a big hospital. And what I saw...
That's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Let's not underplay that.
It is. I have a long background in it. I think it's very important. One of the things that is often misunderstood by researchers about IRBs, institutional review boards, is that their goal is not to promote research. Their goal is to protect the rights of the subjects in the research. So they're actually the natural ally and protector of patients. And that's something that is always misunderstood, because it's a regulatory body, and so everybody looks at it as what I call the clinical research Stockholm syndrome. Not the...
I've never heard that. That is so perfect.
Right, but it's not the Stockholm you think. It's that all of these researchers believe that this stupid IRB is standing in the way of them and their Nobel Prize in Stockholm. And so they look at you and they get angry. It has nothing to do with the other one. So they'd make us out to be the enemy when we're saying, no. We're making sure that patients, participants in trials, are not being exploited, that their rights and their welfare is being protected. And we have laws that came from terrible atrocities that dictate why we do this, and that it really matters. So I came at it from that standpoint, and also being somebody who built technology, and just a general sort of demographic thing. IRB chairs are often in their 60s, have bifocals, and are
tenured.
Are a little tenured, yes. So a little bit harder to murder by their administrators, and not as technology savvy because they didn't grow up native to it. And so they're very skilled, but they're underexperienced in this area for good reason. And so when I became an IRB chair in my early 30s, it was a different story because I was bringing up issues that they were completely unaware of, and then being able to demonstrate to them, hey, these privacy and security concerns are real. The issues around buying and selling data are real. Secondary disclosure of data is real. We have problems here, and because you don't know the problems, you're not able to protect people from them. And so that's how I got into that. And that's also why I left academia to go work in tech, because I wanted to say, you know what? All these technology companies are doing it wrong. All these investors are getting their shirts taken and are not making sound judgments. I'm going to leave, and instead of parroting and complaining when it's too late, I'm going to go upstream and see if I can help. And so that's nominally why I left and started doing this.
It's the digital health snake oil syndrome that
Yes.
I've experienced firsthand running Stupid Cancer, the predatory nature in which the startup mentality trumps the purpose mentality, that you really want to make sure that you're doing something that can translate to the average human being. And I talk about this pretty much on every show, right, Andrew? Hi, Andrew.
That's absolutely the case.
Is that there's this donut hole of the end user always being the prescribing doctor, and yet the other end user, which is ignored by the structure itself, is the actual consumer patient taking the drug, the trial, the med, the scan, and yet industry needs that unrequited end user that isn't the doctor to help them understand how to make money. How do you square that? Because that really pisses me off. I'm going to turn to Eric.
Sure. Would you like me to answer the first question around how I got into this as well while I'm doing that?
I would say build a melange for me.
Sure. So back in high school, I tore my ACL, got operated on, decided that would be a really cool job to be that surgeon. I became pre-med in college, but when I worked in two different hospitals, one in New York, one in Dallas, I found that the doctors really did not seem to enjoy their lives. And so I decided to pursue business. And I worked at American Express launching new products. It was cool, but how passionate can you really be about a credit card? So after business school, I went into technology, and it was great. It was fun. It was interesting. We were doing some pretty neat projects, but at the end of the day, I wanted to do something that would help the world. And so my cousin's kid had neuroblastoma, was given a 1% chance to live past age 4, and is now in her teens, and they call her Miracle Maggie. There are lots of stories that we all have around those things. We're all going to be affected by some type of cancer, either to us or one of our relatives or friends. So around 2008 or so, I joined bensfriends.org as a board member. And
what's their mission?
So the mission is to help people who have rare conditions connect with others like them. So it all started when Ben had a rare disease that he didn't know about. He had a stroke, a brain aneurysm caused by a stroke. During business school, his girlfriend found him passed out on the ground 15 minutes from death. During he got life-saving surgery. And during his 2 years of recovery, he didn't have anyone to talk to about what he was going through. So he decided to start an online support group. He got dozens and hundreds of people to talk to, and his friend said, hey, can you do this for my uncle who has this other condition? And that started us down this path of helping lots of people with rare diseases. So now we help over 100,000 rare disease patients a month, and over about 40 different communities. But that said, there are 300 million people around the world who have rare diseases. There are, I think they counted now, roughly 7,000 rare diseases out there, and that's going to go much higher. So over the last several years, I got introduced to Jeremy by my oldest friend from age 3, who is his best friend in New York. And he said, hey, you guys should talk. I had just been at a tech startup that we sold. And I met up with Jeremy to help him leave his more research-focused background to get into working with healthcare. It is.
It's his fault.
I mean, yes, sort of. It's his fault.
So we hit it off and started a healthcare consulting practice. We got a handful of great clients. The largest became a unicorn, and the smallest of which was Adaptive Health. And Clay early on had been asking for more and more of our time. And Clay is the CEO of Medaptive. Jeremy and I had said early on that if we found an awesome team with a great idea that could help the world, we'd have to consider joining full time. And so in the middle of 2017, after a bunch of months of consulting and helping Medaptive grow, we did just that.
Yep. And I was really biased towards Medaptive. I mean, I have to be very honest about it. When I was at Mount Sinai, I was part of a group of people who worked on one of the first 4 research kit applications backed by Apple to do medical research on a mobile device. And what we focus on at Medaptive is a whole bunch of capabilities that actually take that to the next level. And it dovetailed with a lot of things that I thought I might actually be able to do that could demonstrably help real human beings on both sides. So I had a huge bias. I was like, yeah, we can join them full time.
But you had a trigger moment. You had a trigger moment where you realized that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to move away from this academic position and really demonstrate that it can be done a different way.
Yep. That trigger moment happened in 2015. It happened on a phone call I had with somebody at Apple when I realized that they needed help and I was providing them help with something. I was happy to do it and they asked for it, which, by the way, they're one of the few tech companies out there that will ask, which is to their credit. And I realized that this was a way bigger problem than I had imagined. I sort of naively thought, they're Apple. They design these beautiful things. They have hundreds of billions of dollars, right? Of course, they got this covered. Wrong.
Right. Well, not right, wrong, but I agree with you
Yeah.
that it's not.
Yeah. So that was my trigger, was these companies don't know what they're doing. We need to make sure they do it right.
So, Eric, besides realizing that you had like this random mishpach relationship with this guy you'd never met before, did you have a specific trigger moment? Because you have a very unique backstory to your career.
I don't think there was one particular thing that happened, but a series of events that happened. You know, when I was born, I was actually born very premature. I don't ever talk about this, but I was
And now you do.
and now I do, apparently. So I was
On the record.
So I was supposed to have a twin. My twin didn't make it. I just knew
Right
that-
here.
I just knew, and I didn't find out about that until I was roughly 24.
Wow. Okay.
I knew all along that when I was born, I wasn't supposed to make it myself. They basically told my parents, go pray, which is essentially a death sentence. We can't do anything for him. So thankfully, the hole in my heart closed, and obviously I'm here and survived. And so that part I always knew. I was appreciative of just life, and so I don't think I'd take things for granted, and I want to get the most out of it. I'm always active and trying to be out there. But I also realized over time through living through 9/11, seeing Miracle Maggie survive, seeing a number of friends or relatives go through either death or cancer or being sick, that I wanted to make an impact on the world, and I wanted to do something that could leave a legacy.
Spectacular. I'm curious to know what you think it is that health tech companies have been doing incorrectly.
I think in general, there might not be the aligned incentives in place that helps everyone move along the same path. So what you see oftentimes in technology is people come in and break stuff. And that doesn't work in healthcare. Our head of patient engagement, Michael Rogan, likes to talk a lot about how we need to enable patients to unburden themselves of what's going on with them, but then not push them any further. So as an example, when researchers often ask surveys or questions of patients or participants in studies, they often will just say, gimme, gimme, gimme. And they keep asking questions, but they don't really feed them anything back. And they don't really take into account what's going on in the patient's mind. And so Michael and Jeremy and Clay and our team and Maria have ensured that we are taking patients into account first. So whenever we ask questions of patients, we always make sure to give them something back so that they feel like they are participating and they can see that we are listening, or that our clients
Make it more of a relationship, humanizing.
right. And then
That often dehumanizing experience.
right. You also don't want to do things like streaks oftentimes in healthcare, because that can be very demoralizing. If you've been on a streak for 18 days and then you fall off, you don't want to get back on the horse. Instead, you want to maybe do slight gamification, but it's really about personalizing it, making them feel like they've been heard, helping them engage, and then not going overboard. So you only ask questions when you think you can get answers, and not after that.
And you're using some terms that I'm a little bit unfamiliar with. I've never participated in a clinical trial, and I've never run one.
Hopefully you won't have to.
Yes. Could we talk about the basics of how some companies do clinical trials and how you do clinical trials?
Sure. So one of the things that you asked earlier about what's wrong with digital health and with health tech, there's a lot. One whole category of it we're going to set aside, and that's the everything wrong with startups is also wrong with digital health. There's that layer.
That's the next show.
Right. But that layer is its own layer. And all that is, in my mind, and this is, I say all that is almost dismissively, but not meaning it that way. All that is a mapping of, we all know what all the failures are in startups. Apply that to health. Fine. There are unique things that are unique to how humans engage with their health or don't engage with their health, and how they engage others around them to either support that or get assistance for it, whether it be the system or their family or care providers, you name it, their community. Those things are specific to health, and people are really bad at that because they are just taking what they learned elsewhere and making the dumb assumption that it will work there. Social media and gamification, as Eric pointed out, really not going to work. If you are in a serious condition, you're in a clinical trial for something that's serious or chronic, you got a lot going on. Being reminded every day that you got that going on, that's not going to help you. Doing something at a low level that's supportive and allows you to unburden that stress and ensure that we still have that tether to you and that connection, and the connection never gets broken, even if it's at low level of engagement, is far more important than arrogantly thinking you're going to drive somebody else's behavior to do what they want. It's foolish. So there's that. Within digital health, my biggest thing that bothers me, people don't do research properly, or they don't do it at all. It's the snake oil effect. It's what that Matthew talked about. They come in and they say, this works. I look at them and go, Food and Drug Act and the Cosmetics Act says you need to vet your labeling. Stop. I mean, I can't tell you the number of digital health companies that put labeling and statements on their websites that violate the FDA's rules. And they don't test things. There is a corollary for phase trials for digital. I've been writing this up for a while. I haven't put it out there, but there is a corollary of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. There's the equivalent for digital products, whether it be diagnostics, devices, things that help intervene and help people manage their symptoms, you name it. There's a corollary for it, and people aren't doing it. But if you want things to work, you want to study them methodically, you want to put it through a pathway where people can be really sure that it works. Otherwise, you wind up with garbage. And society deserves better. Technology has transformed a whole variety of fields. When you open up this field, we should not merely reiterate in new technology old problems. We need to make sure that people's dignity and autonomy is protected and improved, because new technology could help with that. We need to make sure that the most vulnerable amongst us actually receive the greatest benefit, instead of continuing to place them at the end of the line and at the back. And when you open it up to do it, the way to get that done, in my opinion, is the technology needs to be built with ethical, legal, and social implications baked in from the beginning. And
Can't
there's ways to do
imagine
that.
how many IRB chairmen with that experience do dive into this particular well of digital health engagement, almost philosophy. Most people don't ask to be advocates. No one wants to be a patient. No one expects to have to join a club that they didn't want to be a part of. And when we first met and you talked about Ben's Friends, it really did harken back to pretty much the entire reason I started Stupid Cancer and all the other incredible peer-to-peer groups where there's no judgment and no stigma. But with that hat on, you're also living in this space as a real actor and not a bad actor. So where in the spectrum of holy shit, I have something, holy shit, there's a treatment, and holy shit, I'm either out of the woods or living with this, do you guys play in that life spectrum?
So depends. With my life, it is different, right? So with Ben's Friends, we help
So let me
people
go
who-
back. I was referring to the trial.
Got it.
So where in the life cycle of a patient that enters this shit happens store do they interact with your perspective and philosophy on their care?
I think two spots. And Eric, maybe you can address the foundation one, and I can address the trial one. And I'll just sort of outline it and I'll sort of toss it over to Eric. We have a variety of different clients who use technology from Adaptive Health. One would be disease foundations, the kinds of groups like what you founded that supports a mission of a specific group experiencing a specific thing. And for them, they often want to collect data from people who are in a registry and then provide them back. And this is unique to us, I think, compared to many others, supportive information. Instead of just give. Let them know they're being supported. Send them stuff that's useful to them and create a relationship that grows and is lasting. And so foundations have one piece of it, and that's pretty early because they're not actively on some drug or device, any kind of intervention. Eric has a lot more to say about that. He's a lot more close to that one. And then the other area would be in clinical trials themselves. And this is another segment that uses our technology because the technology is pretty flexible. And these would be pharma companies, device manufacturers, academic medical centers and hospitals, people who conduct research. So the investigators who conduct research and interact with those participants who are in clinical trials or research studies. And so we're hitting two sides of a relationship and supporting both and pointing them towards one another and providing them with the tools in a very tech-enabled way to improve that relationship. Because if the relationship is important, the outcomes you want can have the opportunity of occurring.
Back with our guest after the break.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
So on the disease foundation side that Jeremy mentioned, patients, I can't imagine a much more traumatic experience than being in a clinical trial. You have a disease, you haven't been able to get cured by whatever is existing right now in terms of medicines and solutions out there. You are in a trial that is scary. You are on a drug that may or may not work. Oh, actually, by the way, you might not even be on the drug.
Right.
If you are on the drug, you may have side effects. It's the perfect storm of bad and of scary. And so to the extent that we can provide those people with the support that they need is extremely helpful. So a little backstory about how Clay Williams originally founded the company. His mom died of pancreatic cancer. Clay had to go through a series of registries. He had to give blood, he had to answer a bunch of questions, and then all he got back was a thumbs up, you're in the clear. Well, being a bioinformatics guy, what did you do with all the answers I gave you? And so that's partly why we make sure to always give someone something back. So when a patient has cancer, in this case, metastatic breast cancer with one of our clients, they would hear about the registry, they would join the registry, they would answer a series of survey questions, they would input a series of treatment history, so what surgeries they've had, what medications they're on, what medications they're on, what trials they've been through, et cetera. And then we immediately feed them information back in the form of what we call personalized insights. Those might be articles that are hyper relevant to them. Those might be conferences or webinars. It also can show them graphs or charts based on how the community as a whole has answered these questions. Also that they feel like they are being heard and they're part of an overall community. We also recently launched clinical trials matching. so that once you've answered the previous questions, you will get matched in potential trials that are a good fit for you. And those trials are actually taken from clinicaltrials.gov and translated, so to speak, into easier to understand language, which is a issue sometimes with some trial language, as we spoke about earlier. We want to put things into words that people are going to understand.
I like the idea of the human intervention during oh shit moments like this. And I've spoken ad nauseum at conferences and on our show and about how the trials itself are only as good as not just if you qualify, not just if the exclusion criteria is there, not just if the person at the center still works there. I think we call it the cholesterol in the artery of enrollment. And what is the angioplasty needed to guarantee that if you are eligible for a trial, how is it not scary as fuck? How do you actually get there? How are you treated like a person? And how are you not, if you're rejected, it's not like you're breaking up with your wife or your girlfriend because, oh, I'm sorry, you have diabetes? Go the fuck away. And that happens every day. And that could be 15 podcasts of patients and their horror stories about the hope that they were given, as scary as that is. And yet they can't get there and they can't leave their kids. And just to wrap that up, because we focused so much on Gen X and millennials, it's a part of your life where the disruption is so different than if you were, on Medicare.
That's a lot, and it's a big problem.
I just kind of went on a bit of a rant.
No. And I was nodding and smiling. Too bad podcasts can't show, nods and smiles. Nodding and smiling. In one way, Medaptive Health enables the operator to do the angioplasty better. Everything Eric described is being done by the client on our tech. They put their content in. They sent it to people. And so it's as good as the operator, but we gave them a much better scope. And so we gave them a scope. It's the difference between, if anybody knows the background of how urological surgery went in the last 20 years or 25
my old
years.
job, sure.
So urological surgery changed dramatically when we went from these scopes that people had always used, and there are arthroscopic scopes. I mean, they use it for all kinds of different things. They went from scopes that had like one or two things in them, and then were, a certain level of accuracy, to having an augmented reality Da Vinci device where the surgeon sits at a console and controls very precise robotic arms that can do manipulations that human hands are incapable of. And what we are trying to do for clinical trials is that we are bringing you the Da Vinci.
That is a great metaphor.
And it allows people to do more with their knowledge and translate that into increasing cycles of support and engagement for participants. And it's taken from the basic understanding that experts wake up every morning and want to do right by their patients. I have a colleague who's a deputy physician in chief at Sloan Kettering. His name's Larry Norton. He's one of the world's best breast cancer oncologists. Brilliant guy. And he and I have talked about this many times, where we don't want technologists replacing expertise. We want technologists amplifying the expertise. It's not artificial intelligence. It's what Fred Brooks in computer science at UNC Chapel Hill said decades ago. It's intelligence amplification. How do we make them more efficient? How do we make their intelligence translatable? And how do we make it so that it actually works? So we built the next generation machine to gobble up the clinical trial and turn it into something that, where appropriate, because there's places it's not, you are making and amplifying the abilities of somebody who cares and wants to do it right.
So, all right. Wait, hang on.
So the follow-up, the thing that you give participants after they participate in a trial, what does it look like exactly? And what is the experience like for the person compiling that content? How do you make that easy for them? And how is it truly substantial and useful?
So the good thing is that oftentimes researchers have some insight into the populations that they work with. If you're a breast oncologist and you've been doing it for 20 years, you know, hey, I have patients who care about these things because I hear them tell me all the time. So hopefully you have some insight into it. If you're not listening to that, I mean, this is the whole reason we have PCORI, patient-centered outcome research. Like, this stuff should exist. There should be more of an interplay. The content experts know what things they want to send you, and they know what things they don't want you to see as well. They don't want Dr. Google inserted in the relationship between them and their patients. It's annoying. It sows distrust. It creates all kinds of problems, and then people end up doing things that are against their own interests that the clinician would not want them to do because the clinician has an idea about how to try to help them. So they, from that standpoint on the content, we are enabling a much easier way for the clinician to deliver what they think is useful and important information. But we don't decide what that information is. In terms of how it looks, I mean, Eric can tell you more about the experience, from looking at our one of our clients' apps, MBC Connect, the Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance, because they have
very well,
and they have a lot of things on that app. And the app is, we provide them with that app to use, but all of the content in it, they put on it, and that's a key differentiator. It's self-service.
Trust.
Well, yeah, but they should be the experts. Yes. I'm not a medical oncologist, and so why should I be developing and deploying content to metastatic breast cancer patients over my dead body? I shouldn't be doing that. It's not my expertise.
We provide the platform that enables these researchers to not only deploy the content that Jeremy's talking about, but also to segment to individual users. So if you are person A, who is a female over 40 with this particular type of breast cancer, you may see something different in the personalized insights than someone who is male, who is 72, who has this particular type of breast cancer. Oh, by the way, males do get breast cancer. And we've actually seen from the males that are participating in the registry built on our platform that they're happy to see, not happy, but they feel better about seeing their other males because they don't meet or see very many other males because there's a bit of a stigma there. One key piece that I want to mention around Metastatic Breast Cancer Alliance, one of the problems that we've seen in healthcare is that most organizations don't share data. They hoard their data, and that has inhibited advances in medical research. One of the things I love about MBCA is that they've made all the data freely available in an open data registry on mbcconnect.org. So you can actually now go on and see reams and reams of de-identified data, right? We're putting the patient first, so you can't tell who's who, but it has reams of data that we don't think has ever been amassed before that hopefully researchers will be able to see and come up with some sort of solution or cure for metastatic breast cancer.
Yeah, and I the metastatic conversation was always let me start. The metastatic breast cancer aspects of advocacy has a whole different vibe and flavor and culture to it. And oftentimes they feel obviously mislabeled and ostracized, and they don't consider themselves survivors, and rightfully so. And I remember there was a massive push to get one of the leading breast cancer organizations in the world to start talking about metastatic cancer and not just chronic breast cancer. And the infighting between the stage 1 and the metastatic. So the idea to give a community the opportunity to own their own identities together is very new. And digital health, social media, and advocate groups get full credit for recognizing how the river carves itself and where to meet those needs. I'll ask you one more question because this is clearly a 14-part series. And this is a loaded question, but you can probably come up with a simple response, is if you had to think of the one thing that really keeps you up at night about the barriers to progress, what would that be for each of you? Take all the time because we can cut out the silence.
So we are mission driven, and we are focused oftentimes on under-researched populations. Current research tends towards frankly, older white males, because that's who is often funding the research. But there are women, kids, minorities in the middle, or also rural folks in the middle of the country, or indigenous tribes that are often largely ignored. You actually hit upon it with metastatic breast cancer. Most research that's done is on primary. And so if we can help people who are under-researched, who are underrepresented, that is one good reason to wake up in the morning. Now, what keeps me up at night is the fact that, this is something Jeremy's pointed out a lot, is that we're largely ignoring a huge part of the market. So when companies do build technology, oftentimes they build it on iOS to start. That is kind of for rich white people. And
It is a
on
coastal
average,
elite platform, isn't it?
It is. And frankly, we want to be more inclusive. And so we've built our platform to where our apps work on iOS, Android, and the web. We also have a caregiver platform in case you're too old or too young, or for whatever reason can't utilize an app. And so we just want to make sure that as many people as possible are covered.
I have a 95 slide long talk that I give on this. That's an answer to the question that you just asked.
How long do we have?
How long do we have? And I've been in the process of trying to turn it into a book because there's a lot wrong. The entire system of interrelated, I don't know, cesspools? I don't know what to call it. Is what keeps me up at night. And we've picked a spot where we can try to tackle part of it, and create a new machine that can hopefully empower the people who are really good, who at this point are probably feeling pretty dejected or oppressed, because the good people exist in this system. They need far better tools. And if we give them far better tools, we will be able to tell the difference between the good and the bad, and then we can focus on getting rid of the bad. So there's that piece of it. There's a couple of things that I felt like I was screaming at the community about for years, and nobody listened until it made it on the front page of the New York Times. And I'm tired of seeing that. I'm tired of seeing the train wreck coming and nobody listening, and then afterwards everybody going, oh, we couldn't have seen that coming. So, well, yeah, you could have, because you were in the talk where I told you to watch for it, and then you ignored it. So there's a lot of people not listening to the obvious problems. I don't know how to solve that. You guys are much more capable of solving that problem.
Well, you have 95 pages to solve it.
At least. I mean, but if people are not listening to the kinds of things that are informed by reality, we have an issue. I'll give you an example. I call this the big data Henrietta Lacks moment. Henrietta Lacks' story is pretty well known in popular culture. This was a woman whose cancer cells and tumor were used without her consent to create products, and then she and those like her who were poor and who were black did not receive the benefit of all the things that were created from her biology. And that is a terrible violation of autonomy and of respect, and it's a terrible injustice as well. There is a big data version of this, and I've been warning people about it for a long time. Health companies buy and sell protected health information, private health information, and I think that's wrong. I think aggregating with either without consent or without saying what you're going to do and then buying and selling it without providing value back to the people whose data that is from is the same thing, except it's the big data version. And I told people to be wary of it. This is where privacy protections, data use, data sharing agreements really matter, where people need to be informed of it. Where doing it without their consent is illegal and should be considered illegal. That lawsuit is waiting to happen, and I don't know why it hasn't. And everybody ignored this, in part because they didn't understand the technology and didn't understand data science, and in part because nobody wanted to fess up to the idea that this is actually wrong, because some people were also trying to cash in on it. And we've had two examples of it. One was the acquisition of a health tech company who created electronic medical record systems for cancer patients, and that entire company was then bought by a pharmaceutical company, which means the pharmaceutical company, in the process of buying a tech company, basically bought the rights to do analytics on all of these cancer patients' medical records without their consent. That's big data Henrietta lacks. Second one was at Memorial Sloan Kettering. And that was when the chairman of pathology, along with a few
This was
funders,
a very public exposed thing.
Oh, yeah.
too.
Oh yeah, and I'm working with colleagues there and talking to them about it because Memorial, to their special credit, cares deeply about fixing this. Their head of their ethics committee is a marvelous man who cares about solving the problem. They had an issue where Page.ai was the name of the company. There was investors on the board of governors of Sloan Kettering and people involved with the pathology department on the company, and they sold the rights to decades worth of pathology reports to this company, and
Without consent.
without consent of the patients and without consent of the physicians who worked for decades to create all those reports and to care for the patients. And so there was a complete disconnect there. These are the big data versions of Henrietta Lacks. How are you going to ensure that there's appropriate remuneration? How are you going to ensure that they focus on and do right by the people whose information and samples they are taking?
Well, these
and
are also
do they have the
people-
right to sell it?
There are
to
also
begin
people
with?
who didn't ask to be in that market to have their stuff
Right.
co-opted either.
Right. They weren't being protected. You go there because it's the best cancer hospital on planet Earth, and you are scared. And our job as research oversight people is to protect your rights and to protect you when you can't protect your own interests. And if you're scared, you are open to coercion and manipulation. And my job is to make sure that people don't take advantage of you. And that's that tension. It's the tension between the patient advocate who wants it now because they're scared and they have every right to be scared. And our job is to say, you know what? You're scared. And I'm here to protect you. And I know you want to do this thing over here. And I know it looks seductive to do it, but there's things wrong with it. And you may say, yeah, throw caution to the wind because I'm scared. But I don't want that to be happening. I don't want that coercion.
I asked you guys what keeps you up at night, and now I'm never sleeping again. But on that note, this is clearly a to-be-continued conversation. I feel this is a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. We will definitely have you back. This is, an endless stream of understanding an insanely complicated system. But I just want to end by thanking you for keeping your advocacy hats at the top of your hats. And that is what is helping to define how you are very genuine in trying to make a shitty problem a little less shitty.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
That's all for today, folks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, follow us on social, and tell all your friends to listen. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is a product of Offscript Media. Our executive producer is Matthew Zachary. Our senior producers are Jen Horangeff and Andrew McDowell. Darren Tunn is our production intern. It is recorded, mixed, and edited by Matthew Zachary. Our theme music is by the Mike Van Allen Quintet and by Mara. For advertising and media inquiries, email media@offscript.com. Hit us up at contact@offscript.com to share comments, feedback, and make guest recommendations. For more information, visit offscript.com.